I mean, yelling. And one time I like slammed the door and I just remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, like what is wrong with me?" And I felt so horrible and so guilty and like the worst mother in the entire world.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. I want to start the show off with another review. Amanda says, "This is exactly what I need to hear as a mom right now. Parenting during a pandemic is so friggin' hard, and I'm constantly failing at motherhood. Danielle, thank you so much for reminding me week after week that I am not alone in my failings and that I'm still a good mom. I'm loving the stories that your guests are sharing. So brave and vulnerable." Thanks, Amanda. If you haven't left a review yet, do that right now. Unless you're driving. Then wait until you've arrived. But where are you going? I hope you're getting a kid-free break. If you're going to the store, pick up some Ben & Jerry's. Anyway, have you downloaded your PDF guide for managing big emotions? If you haven't, do your kids never have tantrums? 'Cause tell me about your life. Oh, you just haven't gotten a chance yet? That sounds more accurate. The link again to download your copy is parentingwholeheartedly.com/emotions. Don't forget, go do it right now. Unless you're driving still. So, this interview with Tessa is incredibly insightful because she dives into the research she's done through her work as a therapist working with teenagers and has basically compiled the cliff notes for us as parents. This is one that you'll want to send to your hubby, even if he has to fast forward through her story. So, enjoy! Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Tessa Stuckey. Tessa is a mother of 4 boys and a licensed professional counselor. She specializes in working with parents, teenagers, and mother and daughter relationships, and is passionate about sharing how today's culture affects our kids. She recently published her book, For the Sake of Our Youth, A Therapist's Perspective on Raising Your Family in Today's Culture. Welcome, Tessa.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah.
So you're a therapist and you've written a parenting book, so surely you have it all figured out, yes?
Surely, right? Yeah, right. No, I'm still learning as I'm going, right?
Yes. So you have 4 boys.
I do, yes.
They are 8, 7, and twin 5-year-olds.
Yes, all boys, yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, that. If you walked into my house, that's what you would feel. It's very chaotic, very loud, a lot of poop jokes,
Of course.
the
Yes.
good stuff. But it's really fun too. I mean, they're all at really good ages. They can kind of take care of themselves, but they also still need their mama, and they love spending time with me. So, and my husband. So it's kind of that sweet spot where we're not wiping as many booties and not dealing with as much of like the literal poo-poo, but we're spending a lot of good quality time with them before they transition into those years where that distance is inevitable and they're going to kind of prioritize friends a little bit more. And go off
Yeah.
doing their own thing. So,
Yeah. Well, I know you have so much to share from your book that is just like perspective that we can learn from. But before we get to that, I want to hear more about like your story and your own,
sure.
life experience. So, what did becoming a mom look like for you?
Becoming a mom for me was kind of a culture shock. I was young-ish, not super, super young, but I was 23, 24 when I got pregnant and hadn't figured out what I wanted to do with myself as far as a career goes. My husband and I were not by any means financially stable. I feel like we were just like fresh out of college trying to figure out life. And so becoming, getting pregnant and then having a little baby. And also my husband's job transferred him to a different city. So we bought our first house when my son was only 3 weeks old. And then my husband was working 90 plus hours a week. So, I went from teaching and thinking I wanted to be a teacher to getting pregnant to questioning everything in my life with my career path to a new city, little money, husband working all the time, and this little baby that I had to keep alive and take care of. And it was hard. And I was so exhausted. And I remember one morning, waking up and thinking, I don't get to clock out of this job. This is it. And I remember that moment so vividly because that was the moment that the culture shock for me kind of became my new normal. And I found that acceptance. Not that I didn't want to be a mom, but acceptance of this is our new lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so it made it easier once I was able to find that acceptance. But it was quite a ride for a while, and then the pressure of breastfeeding, and then he was always hungry. He wasn't getting enough, and I had to supplement, and I felt guilty for that. And then I decided that I wanted to go back to school to get my master's in clinical mental health. And I mean, that rocked our world too. So when he was 5 months old, I went back to school, went to school
Oh,
at night.
wow.
Yeah.
That's,
So it was a lot.
yeah. That's not the typical path of timing, maybe
Yeah.
ideally.
Yeah, no, not at all. So yeah, I went back to school when he was 5 months old. And it was evening classes. And then I also, because we were low on money, I started a photography business. And so I did that during the day and then went to school at night to get my
Wow.
master's. So, yeah.
No pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you proceeded to have like 4 kids under 4.
Right. So then about halfway through my grad program, I got pregnant again and had my second son. And then I graduated. And then a week after I graduated, I found out I was pregnant with twins.
Oh my
So it was a lot. And we had the 2 boys and I thought, okay, I'm going to graduate. At the time, the 2 boys were 1 and like fresh 3, like he had just turned 3. And I graduated and I had a job lined up to be a therapist and I was ready to go. And then I got extremely sick and dehydrated and found out I was pregnant. And then I found out I was twins. And that that was the biggest shock in the world for us. And so I chose not to work so I could stay home with the 3 and 1-year-old and try to, kick my feet up occasionally being pregnant with twins. And so, yeah, that happened and the twins were born. And so I had a 3-year-old, an almost 2-year-old, and then the twins. So 4 under 4.
gosh.
Yeah, it was.
Bless you.
It's a lot. I just remember going to the grocery store with the 2 toddlers while pregnant with the twins and women stopping me going, I'll be praying for you. I'll be thinking about you. And all I thought was, I think I'll be okay until the twins are old enough to like get into things. Like pray for me when they're mobile.
Yeah.
I think I got it while they have to sit in the rock and play or whatever, and I can deal with the other two. But when they start moving, that's when I need some mercy and grace and prayers and all of the above. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's usually when the older siblings have a harder time transitioning because the younger siblings become more of a threat at that stage when they can move around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how did the older boys do with
Well,
the twins?
my oldest did really great, and he was 3.5 when they were born. And so he was really helpful. My second son, he struggled. He was speech delayed, and so he wasn't talking. He was throwing a lot of tantrums, yelling a lot, crying a lot, and obviously that would get me going as well. And I remember one time he had a hard time taking naps. And I'm really big on routine and schedules, especially when you've got 4 under 4. It's like I lived for nap time, right?
Yeah.
And so I would put the twins to bed. I'd put the other two to bed, but my second son, he didn't want to go to sleep, and he didn't want me to leave, and he couldn't express himself very well either because he wasn't speaking well. And so he would throw a lot of tantrums. And I remember one time him getting so frustrated, but me getting even more like I could not regulate my emotions for the life of me because all I thought was, you have got to just be quiet and go to sleep because you're going to wake up the twins, you're going to wake up your brother, and like I need a minute to myself. I need to lay down myself. So like go to sleep, and he wouldn't. And I remember, I lost all control of my emotions, and I remember yelling at him during nap time, which makes zero sense because I'm yelling at him to be quiet
Yep.
and to go to bed so he doesn't wake anyone up. And I'm yelling. And one time I like slammed the door, and I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like what is wrong with me? And I felt so horrible and so guilty and like the worst mother in the entire world. Luckily, it didn't wake up any of his brothers, but I immediately, scooped him up and held him and rocked him and hugged him. And I ended up just crying with him. And that went on, he wouldn't go to sleep at night very well, like for a while. And there were times when I would just like go down to my own room and just cry, thinking like, will we ever get past this? And I remember thinking at the time, we're stuck here. Like this will never stop. Like I'm going to be dealing with this forever, which is a ridiculous, irrational thought.
Yeah.
But in the moment, that's what you think when you're like in the middle of that storm. You're just like, it'll never stop.
Yeah.
And luckily it did. And he ended up, getting speech therapy and talking just fine. And now he talks a lot. But so yeah, that was a really, really rough time for us as a family and for him,
Yeah. It's that helpless feeling that takes over when we feel like we have no tools, there's no other option, like nothing's going to help the situation or fix it or make it better. We just panic.
And I think on some level, and I don't want to say this in the wrong way, but I think on some level I was too honed in or focused on what I needed and maybe some selfishness. Like I just want to get downstairs and be alone for a little bit, or I just want to go downstairs and pour a glass of wine and have some peace of quiet before, I have to feed the twins again at 10 p.m. or whatever it is. That in the moment I had a hard time like being with him and like helping him calm down because I just wanted that part to speed up so I could get downstairs or whatever. I think that happens a lot, even I remember with having newborns, and they would wake up in the middle of the night and you're so exhausted and all you want to do is go back to bed. And so you're just like, shh, and rocking him and trying to put him back to sleep so that you could get to bed. But the nights that I found acceptance, like I'm up, he's up, like, here we go. This is just one of those times. Then I handled it a lot easier with, low stress and like a calm heart and a calm mind, and he would go to bed quicker, right? Go back to sleep
Yeah.
quicker. So I found that if I'm able to kind of put my needs aside for a little bit so that I can focus on what my child needs in the moment, it actually is going to be resolved or smoothed over a little bit quicker so I can get to what I need at some point quicker.
I can totally relate, because
Yeah.
if there was an easy button for getting my kids to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would make everything easier.
It'd be worn out, right?
It would. It would be like almost white at this point, because that has been the single most pain point for me as a mom, is just go to sleep. Because if you would just do that, everything else seems like I could handle it. But if you won't do this, I can't handle life. And just feeling that like panicked pressure of like, I can't control you, but I really want to right now.
Yes, it's that control aspect of it. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, but acceptance is the only option, really.
It really is. And every time we fight it, it just makes us more frustrated and feeling defeated and exhausted, So finding that acceptance quicker is key.
Yeah.
For sure.
Nobody likes staying in that miserable state.
No.
So, yeah, you were in graduate school, pregnant with twins, handling 4 kids under 4. Anything else at that point in your life?
No, I went back to work. I started working as a therapist when the twins were 4 months old.
Okay.
So I started building my practice, working Saturdays actually, because that's the only time I could. And then Saturdays kind of became my day, where I would work in the morning and then I'd be able to do whatever I wanted in the afternoon. So it actually ended up being more of a self-care time for me, where I could go to Target if I wanted to, or I could go have coffee with a friend, or go get a massage, or just like drive around listening to music and being alone, because I was with the kids, the rest of the week. So I was really grateful to have that time. And then I built up my clientele enough to where I switched to during the week, and that slowly evolved with the kids starting school and, preschool and all that stuff, and still had to get like a nanny and get creative with the childcare and stuff. But I went through a rough time when the twins were about 6 months old. So I started work when they were 4 months old, and when they were about 6 months old, I noticed that the times when I was at home, I was feeling restless, bored, inadequate, not satisfied, like I wasn't enough. Even though I was home with my 4 kids all day long and I'm doing the hardest job in the world,
right?
I just didn't feel like I had enough purpose or anything to separate from my identity as mom. And I remember scrolling through Pinterest and being like, oh, I want my husband to work on this weekend, or I want to do this to the house. I love like house projects. And I remember one day during nap time, because at that point I had it down, saying to myself, like, I don't want to wait for my husband to get home to do this stuff. I want to learn how to do it myself. So I ended up getting into woodworking, which is really funny. But if you want a coffee table built, I can build you one.
Hey, look at you.
Yeah, I went out and got all my own tools, and I would look forward to it every nap time and every bedtime. It was my thing. And I would go out there, put music on, bang some nails into a board. It was very therapeutic. And build all sorts of things. And it was great for mindfulness, for feeling some sort of purpose outside of just mom, something to look forward to, very productive and fun. So that's kind of, I don't know if it was a postpartum blues or depression I was experiencing, but I didn't feel right emotionally. And so I needed to do something outside of momhood. And that's what I chose to do. So
that's a creative one, but I love that idea, especially when you mentioned mindfulness, because you have to be so focused and present to be doing something like that. And that's what you need to be able to totally let the rest of the day go and have something just for you to anticipate and look forward to.
Right. And I think it's really easy for moms, and I'm guilty of this, to just look forward to that glass of wine at the end of the day. And I kind of got sick of that being my thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want that in my everyday life, or, something that my kids were going to grow up, or that I didn't want that to be my driving force,
Yeah.
and so I needed to find something else. And so that's kind of why I got into it.
So do you still build?
Not as much. That Christmas, it's funny because that Christmas, like, everyone in my family got like a homemade gift from me, like a plant holder or picture frame or whatever.
Yeah.
Not as much. I love to do house projects though, so I'm glad that I know how to work all those tools, so that, if I needed to do shiplap in a room, or wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
knock down a wall, and my husband would help me build something, like, it happens. It just doesn't happen as much. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it sounds like you had it when you needed it most.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you for finding something.
Thanks.
And it's always nice to hear what works for other people, because you never know what's going to work for you. So it's helpful to kind of know.
Well,
what
I would have
people do.
never thought that woodworking would have been my thing, but it was, and it's awesome. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything you wish you would have known earlier, or like what advice for that time of craziness really helped?
I think just focusing on reminding myself that it really is just a season, that, or a phase, whatever you want to call it. And that, I think it's hard to take advice when you're in the middle of that. People can say it's going to be okay, or it'll get easier. And it's easy to sit there and go, but what if it doesn't? Or it's not easy right now, and this is what's happening right now, and I don't want to deal with it. But saying something to myself along the lines of, okay, this is just the season we're in. That doesn't mean it's going to be like this forever, has always been really helpful for me when I find myself kind of caught in that storm, or when I feel like I've lost control, or things are just too chaotic and overwhelming. It's helpful for me to remember that there's going to be a lot of downs in this life. It's not always going to be up, and that doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever. So, yeah.
Hey friends, just checking in. How are you holding up? I mean, there's only a global pandemic, a worldwide health crisis, and the most insane school year with no winning solutions on our shoulders. Are you paying close attention to your mental health? Your mental health has a direct effect on your child's mental health. You can't give them what you don't have. Asking for help is a sign of courage, humility, resourcefulness, self-awareness, and honesty. All things we want to be teaching our kids, right? We have to lead by example. If you're not about to find a local therapist, have you heard of BetterHelp? They are a sponsor of this podcast, and they're here to help. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp will assess your needs through a questionnaire and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. Their counselors are legit. Licensed, trained, experienced, accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, or licensed professional counselors. And BetterHelp is committed to helping you find a good match, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. It's accessible for clients worldwide, and financial aid is available. As a special offer for Failing Motherhood listeners, you get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/wholeheartedly. Visit betterhelp.com/wholeheartedly to get the help you need today. Your kids need you whole. Okay, back to the show. That perspective is everything.
Big time.
So tell us about your book. Where did it come from? What's it
Okay.
about? All the things.
Yeah. So as we said, I'm a therapist, and I ended up working mostly with teenagers. And I loved working with teenagers because I thought I was so young and cool that like they thought I was young and cool. So I was like,
Of course.
so whatever. And I actually work in my hometown. So I grew up here. I went to the same high school, so I thought that they'd be able to relate to me and all that. And it all started out great and fine and wonderful and normal teenage issues. But the difference between the teenagers I was seeing and myself in high school was all the problems were the same or similar, but they were all having suicidal thoughts. And that was really, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to sit with these teenagers and then, complain about their mom or have a problem with this or that. And then I'd help them through that. I was not expecting them to say, well, my mom got mad at me, so I was thinking about hurting myself at all. And it threw me off. And I ended up, at the same time, our community was going through what's called a suicide cluster with a bunch of teenage girls. And it was just a really scary time. And I lost a lot of sleep being a mom of 4 little ones. This was about 5 years ago. So, being a mom of 4 little ones, growing up in this same community, the same world, it really just scared me. And so I decided to kind of go on this journey to understand what was going on within our culture, because everything they were presenting to me was not what you would put in the mental illness category. You would put it in the mental health category, but not the mental illness category. And so at first I thought, oh, my client's not opening up enough. Let me peel back some layers, find out where the trauma is, where's the abuse,
Right.
where's the mental illness, where's this, this really deep rooted issue. And it wasn't there. And so I found, in the couple years of research that I did, I found 6 cultural influences that have affected teenage depression, anxiety, and suicidality. And so I felt very pulled and called to share that with every parent that I know. And so I started doing presentations, and I really wanted to talk to parents of young kids because they can make changes, or not even make changes, just start it off. If you know this information and your child's going to be affected by it culturally, then you can make those parenting adjustments before it even gets, to a point where it's uncomfortable.
Right.
And so I started off talking to just parents of young kids, and then that morphed into just parents of all ages. And then I started writing the book, which I did not sit down to write a book. I sat down to write an article, hoping to just publish it for our local newspaper. And I just kept writing. And so the first part of my book is it breaks down the 6 cultural influences. And then the second part of my book is the what to do, the action part, and how to build strong connections with your kids, no matter what their age is, and how to help them build resiliency. So that is what my book is.
That's huge. That's so important.
Yeah.
Because that's every parent's worst nightmare is to have their baby have those thoughts.
Yeah.
And if there's something we can do about it, we want to know.
Right. Absolutely. And I think some parents think that it doesn't apply to them, or, I only have an 18-month-old, so why would I need to know about this now? When really it's really simple things that we're doing as parents that have contributed this. Like if your baby is fussing out to eat and you hand them your phone to watch Mickey Mouse, like that right there is one of the problems, is that instant fix and disconnection from the table. And so it's technology is a huge contributor. So it's important for parents of all ages to kind of understand what world their kids are growing up in.
Yeah. What are the 6 contributors?
So the first one is a glorified option. So kind of like a social trend. It's, suicidality, self-harm, teen depression. It's being talked about now more than ever. And while spreading awareness is really great, it's not being balanced with the proper preventative care. So when we're talking about it to spread awareness, unintentionally, it's putting it on the table for young kids. So that's the first one. Mm-hmm. The second one is, and this is the number one contributor, is kind of what I just said, that instant gratification. So our kids are growing up in a world where they don't have to wait for anything. They don't have to experience any sort of discomfort. They don't have to be bored. They don't have to, wait to get into karate practice. They don't have to do anything that's uncomfortable for them because they have either mom's phone or an iPad or something, some sort of tablet to kind of keep them entertained and fixed. And so without that instant fix, then you'll find that they don't have coping skills to struggle through anything. And then when they hit their hormonal years and those big emotions hit them, they don't know how to cope and they want an instant fix for that. And so if, self-harm and suicidality are already an option and they want an instant fix, that right there is a bad formula.
Yeah.
So that's the second one. So the third one is the lack of personal connections that are being made, again, due to technology. So my book talks a lot about how social anxiety is on the rise for a lot of teenagers and young adults because they never learn how to make eye contact very well. They don't know how to talk with people and socialize correctly. Now, some kids do, absolutely, but the opportunity for that is not happening as often because of technology. And, obviously with social media and everything, which is meant to connect people, it's actually causing a big disconnect. And, if we live in a world where we feel isolated and alone, then that's really unhealthy. And we're not going to be able to necessarily put ourselves out there as much.
Right.
Which brings me to the fourth contributing factor, which is attention seeking, which attention seeking has always been a contributing factor to all of that, but it's even more so now. And so my book really kind of breaks down attention isn't a bad thing. Wanting attention is a natural human want and desire. It's wanting to feel important and wanting to feel valued. And if we're living in a world where no one is connecting, you're not going to feel important. You're not going to feel valued. If your own parents are staring at their phone when you're home, you're not going to feel important or valued. And you might seek that attention in an unhealthy way. And so it's bigger. The attention part is bigger than it has been in the past. And then the fifth one is social media. And with social media, I break that down into 5 reasons why social media has really contributed to it. But, it kind of goes with that lack of personal connection and the attention seeking. Social media is there and social media has a ton of problems with it, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like what we were talking about before we hopped on and recorded, how exhausting social media can be. And that's what's happening with a lot of these teenagers is they feel the need to keep up. And that brings me to my 6th one, which is pressure. So not so much, pressure from parents and pressure from school is happening, but I think more than ever, pressure within the individual is the strongest and the worst it's ever been. So that pressure to on social media come across as perfect because everybody else is perfect, comparing yourself, staying up all night, either because you're on your phone or because you had all these things you had to do during the day. And then, you have to catch up on homework at night. So lack of sleep mixed with the desire to be perfect. I mean, it's just this really horrible pressure that we put on our kids, and they live in a very go, go, go lifestyle, which fortunately with quarantine, it's slowed down a bit. But that go, go, go lifestyle has really rocked a lot of their worlds in a really negative, harmful way. Yeah. So those are the 6 contributing factors, and kind of you mush them all together and we have a really, really scary situation.
Yeah.
And
it's a bad cocktail.
Yeah. And every child growing up in today's world is affected by a piece of each of it. So it's important for parents to be aware of what's happening and how it might affect their child in a negative way.
Wow. Yeah. So I think that piece of just the awareness is huge.
Yeah.
Which is so that in and of itself, like we could end the podcast and be like, you need to know this. But that also would leave moms being like, but what do I do?
Yeah. So the biggest goals I would say are to focus on connection and focus on building resilience in your kids. And so I tell parents my number one rule, without a doubt, is no technology during a time of boredom or distress. So if your child is bored or has to wait for something or is in the car or is having an emotional moment or can't understand something, instead of masking that with some form of technology, allow them to feel that and sit in that discomfort for a little bit, which is really hard to do as a parent because that means we have to sit in the discomfort. But it's huge and it's extremely important. So in my book, I talk a lot about communication skills between parent-child, parent-teen, how to talk about some of the really tough conversations. I talk about how to help your child build a coping skills list. In our house, we have what we call the board game, and my son came up with it. He wrote out like 5 or 6 options in a circle and then put a little Lego in the middle that he would spin, and whatever it landed on, he had to go do. So trampoline, read a book, go hug mom or whatever. Or play with Legos, all different options. And I just loved, he came up with that out of boredom on his own. And I just loved that I wanted to share that with everyone. And so I work with a lot of teenage clients on coming up with their boredom list. And then I really encourage other parents to help their child come up with one. And really what that is a coping skills list, right? Yeah. So you don't feel good or you're angry at someone or you're mad at your mom or you're bored or you're frustrated with something, then you kind of can fall back onto your list of things that make you feel better and lean on that a little bit. So I talk a lot about that. I talk about your role as a parent, not staying in that fixer role with your kid, but gradually morphing into that supportive role for them, because that means we have to step back and let them make mistakes and fail and learn and struggle a little bit so that they can build that strength and that emotional maturity. So yeah, I think that's most of, there's all sorts of stuff that I write in the book. I have it like right here looking at it, but yeah, so I talk about, like internet intelligence and when you should give your child a smartphone and the dangers of all that, and kind of how to navigate today's world as a parent, no matter what age they are. Yeah.
It's just a whole new world that us as generation of parents didn't grow up with.
Right.
So we don't have the manual of what to do.
Yeah, no. And that, I'm so lucky that I have this job, because if I was not a therapist that worked primarily with teenagers, I would not know this stuff. And I would definitely still be handing my kid like my cell phone so that they can play a game, so that they can be quiet and stop whining so I could get something done, And so I'm very, very grateful to have this job and to hear what my clients are telling me. I've watched them grow through the years from, going from a 13-year-old to a senior in high school. And it's really a powerful and beautiful experience to be there with them. But then also for me to turn around and parent with some of this stuff in my head and on my mind of, okay, I need to have this conversation with you now so that when you're 12, it doesn't turn into something harmful or horrible. So,
right. Yeah. Which is the whole reason why I'm parent coaching parents that have age 1 to 7, because that is really when the templates are formed and the subconscious is wired and like everything is established for that foundation that they were going to function off of the rest of their life. And if parents have kids that are older than that and they're listening to this, and like there's still plenty of work to be done and changes that can happen that are very, very crucial. But the sooner the better, for sure. And I think we are at a great precipice of time where everything is kind of being put back on the table and reconsidered, and we're noticing a lot of problems, and that can be good for a change in the right direction, because then we're not just like asleep and numb to some of the things that are really undermining what we want for our kids.
Right, exactly.
Because no parent wants to have a teen that is miserable.
And that's what I really try to stress is the inconvenience and the struggle now while they're little is going to set you guys up, your family up, for that protection and that strength to get through those teenage years. So I would rather deal with my son whining and me struggling through that with him now than the heartache of something happening to him when he's 14, 15, and he doesn't want to come open up to me, you know, or he's addicted to video games or whatever, and something happens.
Yes. So that perspective is everything. And I'm so glad that you've given such practical tools in a accessible resource that parents can go purchase. So I'm, of course, going to link that in the show notes and highly recommend that listeners go grab it. But is there any other takeaway that you've personally brought home that you feel like you've been able to see how the influence, you know, firsthand?
Yeah. There's been a lot. Where should I begin? You know, I think one of the biggest things that I hear my clients complain about in my office is what a hypocrite their parent is, or how their parent disrespects them. And that is, that's a big one, because I know that as parents, we want our kids to listen to us. And sometimes we do that and we scare them so that they'll listen to us because we're fearful of something, or we can talk to them a certain way because we are older. But if they talk to us that same way, they will get in trouble. And I don't necessarily agree with that. And when that was, you know, brought to my attention with my clients, like how am, you know, sitting with these teenagers and them saying something like, how am I supposed to respond to my mom being rude to me? But if I do one thing that's rude back, I get grounded, or I get, you know, in so much trouble. And I'm like, man, yeah, like I remember feeling like that as a teenager too. Like, why is that okay for you to talk to me like that, and I'm not allowed to even speak up? So I have really practiced showing mutual respect with my kids and honoring that they have emotions. You're allowed to feel angry. You're allowed to be mad, but I don't like that you spoke to me that way, or we need to figure out another way for us to communicate when you're feeling like that, because that might hurt my feelings, or I might hurt your feelings, or just, you know, noticing that I might have been disrespectful, or I might have been rude, and recognizing that and taking responsibility and modeling that behavior of, you know, atonement and apologizing and saying I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. So I would say that's one of the biggest ones that I've taken home. I mean, obviously I've taken so many different things home, like teaching them to make their bed from a very young age, because I don't want to deal with my 15-year-old not making their bed, or, you know, teaching them to wake themselves up in the morning, because I don't want to have to do that till they're 19, you know, little things like that. But I would say the mutual respect and the not having them view me as a hypocrite is really, really important in our house.
Yeah, because we really have to live by example.
Right.
We have to live and function the way that we are expecting them to.
Right.
In order to have the trust built up, and for them to really have for us to have an influential relationship.
Yeah.
And without that, we are really just like.
Yeah. Well, and we can't be perfect. So this is where I think it gets really hard because we have to lead by example. We have to model the behavior we want them to act, but we don't always want to act like that.
No, we're
we
human.
might have an emotional day or a stressful moment, or we might be frustrated and angry, and we're not regulating our emotions, to respond appropriately. And so in our house, we've made that allowable in a way, not so much where we are all just yelling at each other, but recognizing the emotion behind the behavior. I talk about that a lot in my book, and when I present to parents, is you will get further with your child if you recognize the emotion that is hiding behind the bad behavior. And that's what we try to do in my house. And so my kids are allowed to, call me out on bad behavior, or when I need a readjustment or I need a timeout, my kids are allowed to say, "Hey, mom," we have this thing in our house called the reset button. And then we have another thing called the turnaround. But it's basically, it gives my kids permission to say, "Mom, you need a reset." And sometimes that can be really hard to hear, but it's also, it makes it okay for me to call them out when they need a reset too. So it's that mutual respect.
Yeah. When you have the shared language back and forth where they do feel like it's a team effort and like everybody's trying their best and it's okay to like call each other out, like that's such a safe harbor for them to really thrive within.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's so healthy.
For sure.
So it was the reset button, and what was the other one?
Oh, the turnaround.
What's that?
So when my oldest was 4, so he was 4, my second was 2, and then the twins were newborn or like 6 months old. He was in a really bad mood, and we were trying to get out the door, and I looked at him with my best mom glare and my best mom voice, and I said, "You better turn that attitude around or we're not going to go." And he looked at me with just the meanest face a little cute 4-year-old can make, and he physically did a 360 and came back with this huge smile on his face. And it was just the cutest thing. And I started laughing. And so he started laughing. And it became a thing in our house where you might need to do a turnaround. And so we call each other out on that. And so now they're older, and I'll say something like, "Maybe you should go to your room until you're ready for a turnaround. When you're ready for a turnaround, let me know. I'll do one with you." But we literally will, especially like my twins who are just 5, they will look in the mirror with their mean face and then do a 360 and come back with a smile. And it's so goofy that it works. And so much so that, my kids call me and my husband out on it, or I'll call my husband out on it. And it's just so goofy that you're like, okay, I do need to turn around, and you just do a little whip around and you're laughing at yourself because it's so
my gosh,
funny.
I love that so much.
Yeah, so it's basically just bringing that awareness to the person, holding them accountable so that they notice that their attitude might need a little tune up. Because sometimes, not all the times, but a lot of the times, it really is just a matter of choosing to turn your attitude around. Yeah. And so we do that physically and literally.
Yeah. Well, it's empowering to even realize that that's a choice. And because our kids do just feel like, like life is happening to them. And so helping them have tools to be able to have agency in making their day better, that's huge. They can feel so much more in control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, brilliant ideas. I'm definitely going to get your book.
Thank you.
How else can moms connect with you?
The best way would be either my website, which is tessastuckey.com, or Instagram. My handle is the mom therapist. And I will say I put most of my content on Instagram. And yeah, those are the 2 best ways to kind of get a hold of me or to see what I'm offering.
Perfect. And then the last question that I ask every guest that comes on is, how are you the mom that your kids need?
I am the mom that my kids need because I am just as silly and goofy as I am empathetic and a disciplinarian. I'm striving for that balance, which is not always balanced, but I'm consciously aware of that. probably 99.9% of the time so that I can, you know, be there for my kids in the ways that they might need them.
Yeah. Well, you sound like an amazing mom. You have
Thank
overcome
you.
so much. And
Thank you.
I really appreciate your heart for sharing this important information with parents everywhere, because
Absolutely.
the more we know, the better we can do. And I know that there are so many parents out there that are striving to do their darndest so much that they feel like they're failing so much, hence the podcast. But when we get over that fact and we embrace it and we're okay with it, then we can focus on the things that we can control, which are, and really it comes down to knowing what really matters, because, you know, some of the things are so supplemental that like, it's great if we can make 5-course meals every night, but what really matters is the connection and our kids having coping skills and resiliency. And when we know that and we focus on the right things, then we can do an amazing job. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we'll talk soon.
All right.
Wow. This is definitely an episode I'm going to have my husband listen to. Will you? While there's always things we can improve on as parents, I loved her advice of focusing on connection and building resilience in our kids, working to keep the main things the main things. And always remember, you are the mom that your kids need. Next episode, you'll get to hear from Nike Famajuro, a time management and productivity strategist, something we're all going to need to make it through this pandemic. Do you need a person? One who could literally coach you from overwhelmed and surviving to equipped and thriving? I got you, boo! Go to parentingwholeheartedly.com/coaching and let's get started. Have you left your 5-star review yet? It helps other moms find the show. Do your part. I know we can do hard things. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.